We start. I think this is everyone on our commission here, so we'll get started. We'll start with introductions. My name is Isabella Trujillo. I'm currently co-chairing this commission with
Sam Thompson.
Stephen Smith.
Use your microphone.
Stephen Smith.
And then our other two members are Edwina Tafoya and Al Knight, and they are not available today. And I would like also you all in the front row over here to introduce yourselves, please, because you're very important to this process. So
Just
to
make sure,
record.
make sure you go up to one of the mics so that you.
Thank you, guys.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan Hayden. I'm the executive director of the
I hear it.
Mexico Land Conservancy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chantel Bustillos, and I'm the stewardship manager at New Mexico Land Conservancy.
I'm Michael Siskel. I'm a contractor who's working for the village to help implement the bond funding program.
Thank you. And let's do audience members too, so we can pass the mic around.
Steve Tolber, resident in Corrales Toad Road with an
I
interest.
can't hear you.
Yeah, Steve Tolber.
Okay.
Yeah, with an interest in, I live here and we have an interest in giving some of the land that we're going to buy for a preserve.
I'm his wife, and I agree with him. So
I'm Krista Gilbert, Corrales resident, and I also have some property on Toad Road, and I'm purchasing with Stephen Louise the Brian Boyd easement, and with an interest in putting that into conservancy easement.
Lisa Brown, formerly of the commission and Corrales resident.
Toddy Miller. I'm here to support those folks, as well as you have a current application we dropped off for another piece on Toad and Candy by the Chaskies. And I hope you've got that application. We dropped it off on Monday. Someone nod. Thanks.
I'm Cindy Romatnik. I'm a Corrales resident, but I'm here to speak on behalf of a neighbor who is, I don't think made it here today, but I wanted to talk about getting the village's help in a zoning issue that just changed for her. And she's got quite a bit of acreage that it's getting very expensive for her now, but she also might consider a conservation easement. So I really would like to get some help for her from this group.
Mike Hammond, I'm a Corrales resident and farmer, and very interested in preserving as much farmland as we possibly can.
I'm Stuart Murray. I'm Counselor District 6 for the village, and I'm here to listen.
Thank you. Okay. And we have some slides just to have them up for some reference that we can go through. And then after that, we can have questions at the end from anybody. All right, so next one. I know it's like a awkward slide.
We're gonna share the screen so people on Zoom can hear or see them as well.
Okay.
Sorry.
She's going to share it on the Zoom as well.
Okay.
Hello. All right, so there we just did our introductions. And then on this, we have a map here of the current properties that have conservation easements in Corrales, made by Michael Cisco over here. Is that a shout out credit over here? And you can find this available on the village website if you're interested in zooming in and seeing more. All right, scroll it down, please. Okay, so here's just some basic info on farmland preservation here in Corrales. And if anyone has anything to add to this or edit on this, please let me know. So our farmland preservation program has been around since around 2004. Lisa Brown, is this correct? Okay. 2004, I know, is the first bond. Okay. So that was the first bond. And so Corrales voters have been voting for that. Overwhelmingly, 80% or more of Corrales voters have been voting for it since 2004. And we've had 3 bonds now passed in the past 20 years. And so the village, basics of how it works, we can go into more detail if there's further questions, is with this bond money, the village will purchase the development rights from the applicable landowners and so the property can be placed in a conservation easement. And so that means the land cannot be developed. Of course, the landowner retains ownership and management of the land, and it's still private property. And we have the NMLC as well, the New Mexico Land Conservancy, who helps oversee our program here in Corrales. And I think that's kind of the basics. Next slide, please. Okay, so right now we are in a time crunch and we gotta get moving because this bond we were technically supposed to use now in June, but we are extending to next June. But this process takes a while. So the application period is now open, as you all have known, and you can submit applications now through till June 22nd. You can find that application on the website. It's kind of a little bit tricky to find, but there's also on the village website, there's a search bar and you can enter in farmland applications and it should pop up. Then from there, you can email it in or you can bring it a hard copy in. An email right now, we're sending it to Melanie.
Yeah, I think you're sending it to my email, which is mromero@corrales-nm.org. And
Okay.
I have gotten one application, and then that application we got the hard copy in as well. So that's, as far as I know, we only have one application, but we do have one.
Okay. And then from there, Michael Cisco will kind of take over and he'll get the correct info from you so we can move on with the process. And that also means that us commission members will be doing an evaluation on the property, and that we got to get that done by the 13th of July. And then we're going to present this all to the council on the 23rd of July. So we have to get this done fairly quick. And that's it for this one. Yes. Scroll it down. That's the on the village website. So you have reference there. That's what it'll look like when you go to the agricultural page. Scroll it down. So then a few things. So this is our evaluation criteria that we look at when we are going to the property and we're making our rankings for each member. We will go to the property. We're looking at the visibility view shed, water availability, rural character and history, risk of development, size of the property, current usage, biodiversity, and location of the property, mostly in relation to other conservation areas or less developed areas. And if there's any specific questions on these, please let us know. Right now, we have some really specific concerns, our commission does, and we have seen this with property owners who do have conservation easements, and that is, of course, water rights, property tax, and then the stewardship cost, and as well as other costs that have come with putting their properties into a conservation easement. It's can be a lot of money, and so I know it's can be a process that is really confusing and sometimes, but also amazing. So we want to make sure we can get this all worked out. And I think that's all we have on our end. Do you have anything you want, Sam?
Covered it.
Okay. From there, if there are any specific questions, we can go over those. And if Michael or Jonathan or Chantel want to be more specific, because this is pretty overview, please do so. Yes, question.
If you have a question, please come up to the microphone so that people on Zoom can hear you. And we're recording this to put up on the website, so that'll help.
It's all educational.
Toddy Miller, and I have two questions. One, we understand that some farmland that was thought about has fallen out of the program. Do you have an approximate idea of how much fund you have left at this time in the bond? And when does this bond sunset? So you might be having another bond issue.
Do you want me to answer that question? And also, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Melanie Romero, your village administrator. So after we've already got an agreement for the Tricello property for 6 acres to be put into conservation. So after that and all of the fees are paid, it's my best guess that we'll have about $1 million, give or take a few tens of thousands. So about $1 million or so. And we were actually supposed to have spent the money by June of this year, but that obviously has not happened. So we do have a 1-year option to extend. So it'll be June of 2027 that it needs to be spent by.
So maybe I'm not using the right term. When do we anticipate this bond issue to be paid in full? So another issue would be.
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
However, we have a program now where it rolls. And so we actually will do another bond question in our 2027 election. However, since this bond was just voted on, council may or may not choose to do another farmland bond in 27. So we have other bonds that are dropping off. And so we can do another bond sale. Voters will vote on it in November of 27. Sale would take place in the spring of 28.
So when would Farmland Preservation Board ask for another bond to be on that 2027?
So we'll have some discussions probably in November of this year with our bond attorneys to start talking about, because we'll have a whole year, obviously, to decide what kinds of things will go on the next bond question. So our bond attorney has asked to come in and do a discussion with council probably in November of this year to decide. Normally we've rotated through, Parks and Rec, Fire, Public Works, Farmland. And so we haven't done a Parks and Rec bond since I think 2020. I don't know that they need a bond at this point. So, if they don't need anything, it would go back to the rotation through of the other 3. So it's kind of a hard answer question. I mean, you guys could ask, and whether council decides to go ahead and move forward with that or split it up like we did this last time around, where we were able to do $4 million over a 4-year period. And we did $2 million for farmland, $1 million for fire, $1 million for roads.
Right. So understood. So is that would it be part of your budget process then for the spring of 2027?
Not part of the budget process. No, the bond stuff is a whole separate thing, because we have, there's times, I believe the bond questions are due to the Secretary of State by July for a November election. So that's why we're going to start the discussions in November, a whole year before the election, with our bond attorneys. So we make sure you're on our mayor's message list, because all of that, the mayor's been really good about putting up the agendas and, kind of a recap of what's coming up on council meetings. Just keep an eye on those mayor's messages for when those will come up, but probably November of this year is what we're looking at.
Thanks, Melanie.
Sure.
Any other questions or yes?
I'm a counselor. I get to ask these kind of things.
I'd like Mike to come up and kind of give you a brief idea or give the audience a brief idea how much it costs once they put their application in, and if we accept it, how much it's going to cost them in the long run. So Mike, you want to expand on that?
So cost to the landlord?
Yes.
That might be a Jonathan question. So this speaks to your last slide, concerns about stewardship costs for landowners, because that's essentially what they're paying for. The village covers all the transactional costs, the appraisal, the title work. If we need to do any surveying, all that is covered by the village and is considered transaction costs. And then the landowner is responsible for making the stewardship endowment to the New Mexico Land Conservancy. And so I'm gonna have Jonathan come up and speak about that. He's the expert on that. So
yeah, thanks, Michael. So for us, the New Mexico Land Conservancy, the relationship with the landowner, and the project itself doesn't just end when we close on the conservation easement. In a lot of ways, that's the beginning of a long-term relationship with them. So, you know, we conduct annual monitoring. Chantel Bustillos, our stewardship manager, leads that effort. And that's really to ensure that the terms and conditions of the conservation easement are followed in perpetuity. So we recognize that most people who are wanting to do conservation easements are not going to be the ones to develop their land or, you know, violate the terms of the conservation easement. But we have to be thinking much further in the future about who's going to own that land, you know, subsequently 2, 3, 4 landowners in the future, and make sure that we have the resources to continue to allow Chantel here and other members of our staff to continue monitoring and, you know, potentially legally defend that conservation easement if there are ever any violations. Unfortunately, it does happen every now and then. Oftentimes you get a landowner who, you know, has 2 or 3 owners removed from the original conservation easement. They may not know the intent behind it. They may think that they can get around it in some way. And then we have to involve ourselves and defend the you know, legality of the conservation easement itself. So when we close on a transaction, we typically ask the landowner to contribute to a stewardship fund for each property. This is actually something we're required to hold pursuant to, we actually have an accreditation authority called the Land Trust Alliance that requires that we hold a certain amount set aside for ongoing monitoring and stewardship. And we use basically a calculator tool developed by the Land Trust Alliance and the Nature Conservancy. It tells us, you know, based on how many hours a year we think we'll spend monitoring and, you know, contributing to, we actually have easement insurance too. So we have to maintain insurance on the conservation easements, and we kind of plug it into that worksheet and it spits out a number. And we use that as a guide for our request from landowners. We're a little bit flexible there. We have you know, asked for less than that of Tricello, for example, than what our actual calculator spit out, and they were fine with that. I'm happy to talk more about that. And Chantel is the one who's really boots on the ground doing this stewardship and monitoring. So I defer to her.
Yeah, Jonathan, I have a question. It's certainly reasonable that there be a stewardship fund. And in terms of the possible defenses that might need to be done for a piece of land, are there other things that can happen besides violations on the part of the current landowner?
I mean, in rare situations, there are kind of proposals that are outside the landowner's control. Oftentimes we see like utility companies wanting to basically build like power lines across land with conservation easements on it. And then in that case, we work with the landowner to, you know, tell them, no, you can't do that. There's a conservation easement here. Sometimes we get pushed back and they want to, you know, every now and then exercise eminent domain. We say, well, no, absolutely not. We'll sue you if you try to do that, basically. Thankfully, it hardly ever gets to that point, and we've been able to resolve all violations so far without any litigation. But still, it is you know, a lot of our staff time and resources that we have to spend in those situations.
So, but what I was getting at is there are other things besides simply violations by the current owner
that may come into play that you would be involved in.
Right, absolutely.
Right. Okay. The other question I have is, my understanding in this go round is that the stewardship fee on the 6 acres of Tresello is $60,000 and on a 1 acre property, $40,000. What were those stewardship fees the previous bond?
Ooh, that's a good question. That might actually be a Michael. But I was not around when we did the previous fall. That was what 2020 or earlier even.
I think they were fairly comparable. They weren't as much, but they weren't that far off. Yeah, it wasn't like they were $10,000 versus 40. I think they're fairly comparable. But I can check that.
I would like to know that. I'd like to know how they've changed over time. I think that would be interesting. And also, how often are there problems that arise with the easement properties that you've had to take them to court?
A lot of different factors. Having a subsequent owner who is not the one who would put the conservation easement on the property is a big factor. Development pressure, which is obviously extremely high here in Corrales, is a factor, and how much the landowner wants to kind of fight to quote, get out of the conservation easement. Typically that doesn't last too long because they realize pretty quickly that all the case law and everything is on the land trust side, and we can resolve that. But yeah, it depends. The size has to do with this sometimes too. I mentioned the transmission lines. That's a much bigger issue on larger ranches where really folks have to go somewhere.
Have we had any problems here in Corrales?
We've had, yeah.
But there have been issues that have come up over the past few years.
I guess that's good.
Can you reference those issues? Like, were they specifically a violation or of something, or?
Yeah. I guess I can share.
Can you go up to the mic and talk into the mic, please?
There was a property just a year ago where the landowner was looking to sell, and in this case, the buyer wanted to be able to expand the house, add a pool, all of these other different things that weren't going to be in line with the terms of the conservation easement deed. So I did have a conversation with that potential landowner, and they decided not to move forward with purchasing the property, but something like that has come up just last year.
We have one property that's in a conservation easement now, and I don't know all of the details, but I understand that she intends to sell this to somebody who wants to continue to farm, which is great, but that now the village is requiring her to put in a road.
I don't think I'm familiar with that.
Okay, is this something that you might get into this conversation with her and with the village?
Yeah, it definitely depends what that looks like.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I haven't that just yet.
Thank you. I think there were some other questions.
Yeah, did we have a question? Come on up, please, sorry, just so we can get it recorded. And, oh, nice, thank you. It's all for educational purposes. We can reference later. Thank you.
For the owner considering putting their land into conservation, at what point in the process is the stewardship fee paid due? Is that a one-time fee for the first the first owner to put it in? This isn't in perpetuity or something that is stretched out over other transfers. It's just a one-time fee.
Yes, that's correct. It's a one-time fee, and typically we ask for that at closing. So when you are getting the money from the village, you typically just donate part of that back to the Land Conservancy.
Yeah, there's an initial landowner, a portion of that is contributed up front within 30 days of signing a letter of intent with New Mexico Land Conservancy. And it's a very low cost amount at the front end of the project fees.
Toddy has a question behind you. Yeah.
So along the same lines, we're talking about a piece of property that would two easements coming in, which would be contiguous with the existing 3-acre Boyd one. Wouldn't there be a consideration that might lower those conservation easement fees since it's really been joining on property now? And I have another one.
So yes, that would factor into, that kind of calculus. We could also explore doing the single conservation easement over multiple parcels. We've done that in the past too. That can streamline things and kind of find some efficiencies in terms of how we're doing the project.
Another factor is if these 3 easements are still over separate legal parcels, technically those landowners could sell this 3 different people. So that's part of the risk that the land trust takes on, is that, that's why Jonathan's idea of putting all 3 under one easement and making sure that they can't be sold separately, then I think you would see some savings, because they have to prepare for additional administrative costs, higher likelihood of violation, because the more landowners you have within, an easement, the higher likelihood there is for violations. So, and another thing is the more neighbors you have. That's another thing, Corrales is pretty low density at this point at 1 residence per acre. But 50 years from now, council could say, oh, we're going to lower it down to ½ an acre. And so, yeah, I know. Well, you never know. But what I'm saying is nobody ever knows. That's why we got to prepare for the things we don't know. And yeah, and the costs are put upon the original donor, but they're also receiving the financial benefit from the transaction. So it's difficult to find resources in the future for other landowners to pay into the stewardship. That's why it's done now. Right. A lot of land trusts have explored like transfer fees and things like that. But in the industry, they call those deal killers, because it basically kills deals. People don't want to buy property with a huge transfer fee attached to it. So,
Michael, since you brought up the tax benefits, could you speak to those at this point?
The tax benefits. So traditionally, when you place an easement over your property, in most municipalities, you are now taxed at agricultural value. Some municipalities around the country even have a separate class of open space, which is basically getting taxed at agricultural value because there's no development potential or subdivision potential on your property. The Sandoval County assessor has looked at it differently and doesn't seem to recognize the fact that there is a conservation easement on the property. There's no development rights that can be exercised. There's no subdivision rights that can be exercised, but they're still valuing the property at residential values, which in my opinion is completely unfair. But they're the ultimate authority. I mean, I don't think anybody else can tell them how to administer their program other than them. So unfortunately, with this assessor, you're a little bit stuck until you get a new assessor who maybe sees it differently. So,
or not.
Yeah.
Along those lines, is a challenge to an easement considered a tax? It is. Would NMLC consider helping people with easements make challenges to the assessor's assessment when they turn it over to residential land? Is that considered a threat?
Provide resources to that effect, and I think the instance Michael is talking about is pretty unique in that there would be an agricultural valuation on that land, but for the fact that the landowner has not received water in I think 4 or 5 years now, is that right? And so the assessor, in my understanding, is taking a very overly strict interpretation of what does and doesn't count for that agricultural valuation. But yeah, we've had a lot of conversations with the landowner on how to proceed there, and provide whatever resources we can to help navigate that. Yeah. Right. And we've talked about, we've actually introduced legislation to clarify that, but it didn't get out of committee last session. But we'll, if it becomes more of an issue, that's only going to elevate it in the mind of legislators, and hopefully we can actually get it passed. But
Is there a plan to try to get this legislation through this coming session?
I would love to, yeah. So, it's something I've talked about getting on the agenda for our water and natural resources interim committee. I think they're doing their planning right now, but they usually have at least one meeting in the Albuquerque, Corrales area. And that'd be a great time for, other, members of this commission and, landowners to.
Are you planning on attending that as well? Okay. This is something Kathleen Cates, that's her
Yep.
group. Okay. I think we need to find out when that is and take some people there.
Sure, yeah, that would be great. Matthew McQueen is
Because
actually.
basically what this assessor is doing, any assessor in New Mexico could decide to take it on and do the same thing. And it would hurt conservation easements throughout the state. So even though the problem is right here, it certainly could be a statewide problem. It just depends on the individual assessor. And what she's doing may not change. At least with one of the candidates or with two of the candidates, it looks like they would continue the same thing. We have that in writing from at least one of them. They're recognizing federal easements. They are not recognizing state.
Village ones, right.
And so I find that making a priority of getting this legislative change made is probably my number one priority for the legislature in the next session. And I really hope that you can help us with that because it must be done. I mean, we don't have a lot of open space here in Corrales, and we may look like a bunch of little hobby farmers, but we're not. This land is extremely important to each one of us. And I think that is evident. Anytime you ask people in this village what's important, agriculture, farming comes up number one. We vote for these bonds. We want to keep this land. And we have major threats, with 2 irrigations this year. It's not going to get any better. There's a reason we've been declared a natural disaster due to drought. We've certainly earned it. And we just don't need this other headwind of assessor problems with our easements on top of everything else. So anything NMLC can do and anybody else on this issue would be great. I'm sorry?
I have somebody on Zoom.
What?
Someone on Zoom.
It was somebody on Zoom that unmuted. Did you have a question? I think it was from Carlo. It was Carlo.
Did anyone on Zoom have any questions? If you do, please raise your hand and we will see if we can get them answered.
Anyway, that's off the soapbox.
Stay on it there.
So this is kind of what you may not be able to answer this since assessors have so much power in this at this point. But as someone who's interested in putting land into easement and agriculturally developing it in some way, and with the understanding that irrigation is not a given in the future, what is your position on pump houses and other forms of agriculture? I mean, livestock raising, goats, that's also agriculture, fruit orchards, a little bit easier with less water in a pump house. Going forward to maintain that agricultural designation, or even now, in the wind, and you and I spoke about it, the desire to maintain land for migratory birds and wildlife. And obviously that is a different sort of keeping it natural than farming. So what kind of advice or what do you have to speak to someone who is looking at putting land into easement and looking to develop it agriculturally some way, if nothing else, putting in a cover crop to keep the dust down, or a meadow or something that is, for indigenous sorts of creatures to want to use. So as I'm excitedly thinking about what I want to do, what would you say to all that?
Yeah, so generally speaking, we're very deferential to landowners in terms of what kind of agricultural practices they want to pursue. And we actually have carve outs in the easement deed that allow for minor agricultural improvements, whether it be some of the pump houses you mentioned, corrals, small barns, that type of thing. If it gets to be a large industrial barn, then we can, that might throw up some red flags, and there's kind of a line where it gets to be suspect. But we are certainly deferential to landowners on how they want to manage their land and what they want to grow. When it comes to agriculture versus wildlife habitat, we're also very receptive to land being used for wildlife habitat, but obviously this is a agricultural preservation commission, so I've kind of deferred to you all in terms of your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, just speaking on that, we particularly are, when we are doing our evaluations, we're looking mainly at what is happening currently on the land. And we are, of course, wanting agricultural development, as you said, that I kind of like the way that works. But it is, yeah. I like the way that works. We are looking at that more as one of the more beneficial things that can be on the property. We did have, the wildlife refuge. They applied for a conservation easement and they were ranked the lowest, but not because of that they wanted to put wildlife, but because of the state of the property and the kind of concerns specifically with water rights on that property. And
It's close to the public.
yeah, and so it was kind of, it wasn't so that was ranked the lowest. But I think we would definitely be open to something that has, is more beneficial for wildlife and will not be in agricultural production. I think that would be great we'll definitely rank it and put it on the list.
I think the important thing is that we're looking for land that can be kept for agricultural purposes, not necessarily that it's in agricultural purposes right now, because given the water situation, that's obviously a challenge to anybody trying to grow something here. But, cover cropping it, paying attention to keeping the soil healthy, I think all of that is a real positive to be doing for the land as part of an easement or just because you're a good steward of the land. Lisa, did you have a question?
You pretty much picked up what I was going to say. It's just that we're looking at the long term here. We're looking at perpetual preservation. So, you can use your imagination. This is never going to be developed. That's the the biggest accomplishment here. And so even if it's not fit for farming now, it may be in 10 years. We're doing this for our kids. We're doing this for our grandkids. And so, yeah.
As long as we don't do something that will make that difficult or impossible, we can't pry up a parking lot, but you can take out that cover crop if it's the wrong thing.
It's very possible that in a few years, the river will be really high and there'll just be all kinds of water that we won't know what to do with. Stranger things have happened, maybe.
Gave it back to me. Sorry.
Go ahead.
This question's for Michael. You mentioned some communities have open space zoning. Does that help them in both with tax assessments as well as fitting into conservation easement bonds and that type of thing? What's the advantage of doing that?
One of the advantages is you actually have a category for properties that are under easement, because there's some properties that aren't in agriculture that are under easement and never will be. And they don't have a category that can fit into the tax base in terms of residential, commercial, industrial, agriculture. That's the four basics. So if you don't have if you have a property that can never be developed, residential, commercial, or industrial, that's not in agriculture, some municipalities create another category of open space where it's just, that's what it is. It's not meant for development of any kind. And it also helps when you're trying to qualify an easement, because if you have a municipality who has a tax category for open space, it qualifies your easement as part of its qualifications in terms of public benefit. Like it's meeting a local zoning standard or a local resolution or ordinance. and fulfilling that community's need for open space. So it has kind of a dual benefit. And a lot of times the open space, like I said, the tax rates are similar to agriculture. Sometimes they're lower because they know what economic development are you going to do on that property. It's pretty much passive recreation, hunting. I mean, there's not much money that can be made off that property like you can with agriculture or other uses. So they tax it even lower sometimes. So does that answer your question?
I'd mentioned earlier that I'm here speaking on behalf of a neighbor of mine who is, I think some of you, may be familiar with her property because she may have talked to some of you, but her family's been farming here for decades and decades, and we're talking about 9 acres, and since she couldn't make it here, I'm just trying to find out what I can pass on to her to make things easier for her, because that she's considered a conservation easement over the years, but I think she felt like she needs some, I don't know, assurance or some assistance in doing it and considering to seriously apply. And because her property was just the zoning changed to residential, and they've been farming on the 9 acres. So I just wonder if there's actually, on a personal note, if there's some group of people or a small group that actually could get together with her and answer her questions, because I know she has lots of questions, and I certainly am not going to try to answer them. So I knew that I'd find the pros here. So I just wondered if, even I know the deadline is coming up for the application, but I think she might need some encouragement to seriously consider applying. Maybe after talking to a few people here who could meet with her, is that something that could happen?
Yes, Michael I'm down to meet, but he's got more info.
Real fast before you, I was gonna say, before you pass the mic back, you've said a couple times the zoning changed. We don't have residential zoning in Corrales. We have agricultural, A1 agricultural, where it's 1 acre lot.
The assessment.
The assessor. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. And with the assessor, unless you're actively you're producing receipts showing that you're trying to do some sort of agriculture, she takes your agricultural exemption away. So if without those receipts showing that you're doing something on your land or producing food for your family, or selling hay or something like that, she will drop the agricultural exemption. Yeah, they won't let donations count, and it's also my understanding that if a property owner owns it and then leases it to somebody for farming, that won't count for the homeowner either, which that seems like it's not proper.
Would you say that again, Melanie?
Yeah, the assessor said if a landowner has their land and they're leasing it to a farmer, so it's in production, but it's not the landowner itself, they don't get the tax exemption. Yeah. So, and that was from a meeting we had with the assessor last year. So there are definitely some things that hopefully we can get changed going forward, but it is a little disappointing from a perspective of our taxpayers that, if they do have a cultural or a conservation easement, but they're not actively farming it or doing something agricultural on it, that they can produce receipts to the assessor's office, they're having trouble with losing that exemption. So.
And then to answer the question about questions from landowners. So I'm more than happy to talk to anyone who's interested in participating in the program. Formally over the phone, any questions they have. One of the things I do is once you submit an application, and after the application deadline, I go out and visit all the properties, talk with the landowner, make sure it's a good fit, make sure it's a legal fit, make sure it's a practical fit. For example, I went to visit a property where it was 1.2 acres. They already had a house on the property. And I basically told them, you're not going to get any money from this because you don't have any development rights to give up. So that's something they didn't understand, right? So yeah, I'm happy to speak with anyone about the program and about conservation easements and why you would do them. And
what the benefits are and what the drawbacks are and everything. So for sure.
There's fact sheet for the chair.
Yeah, and let me share something else too. So the Sandoval County has their policies and procedures, and you can take your land out of production for up to 3 years if there's like 8 consecutive weeks of drought. And I think we've been there for several months now, but it is part of their policies. So if your person of interest thinks that you can take the land out of because of lack of water, put it in, just fallow the land, she can go up and apply for that and keep the agricultural exemption. But it's up to 3 years that you can do that for. So just an FYI. And Mike, I'd like to ask you guys a question too. What happens to water rights? Say a farmer doesn't take advantage of, say, irrigation, and they lose the irrigation rights. Does the easement retain those rights, or is it taken away by the agency that's offering them?
So conservation easements do tie the water rights to the land, which is one of the great benefits of conservation easements. Thankfully, we've not had any landowners, voluntarily give up their water rights or, not make beneficial use of them. If that were to be the case, we would intervene and work with them to ensure that they keep the water rights, because we have obviously an interest in that. And there are even, leasing programs like the Strategic Water Reserve, or I'm sure Mike Hammond could talk all about the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District's various leasing programs that would qualify as, kind of retaining the water rights, but leasing them out for, wildlife or environmental or conservation purposes.
It looks like we have a question on Zoom. Carla, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Thank you. Returning back to the question on taxes. So Melanie, you mentioned that even despite having, a farmer farm the land and it's not farmed by the owner, the assessor will not count that as agricultural land. Okay, so then if that's the case, on an 8-acre piece of land, of like agriculture, if that piece of land comes into the land easement, and then is not, like, and then it is not farmed. I mean, how is if it's not, yeah, if it's not leased, but then it's farmed, then what happens to it? Like, will the taxes be agricultural? What will it be? Will it reserve it back to residential? What is this?
That's kind of the question we have for the assessor right now. That's kind of the battle that's been going on is, some of the people that have had their conservation easements and have not been able to farm it have now been taxed as residential, even though there are no development rights tied to that property anymore. So it is an issue that we've had. And the assessor's office has said, as Councilor Murray alluded to, if you go up to the assessor's office and kind of plead your case in person, they'll take it on a case-by-case basis. So I do also echo his sentiment for the lady that's here for your friend. Maybe go with her to the assessor's office and just say, hey, can you reevaluate this and just plead the case and see what happens. Yeah, it's just it's all sort of up in the air right now, and that was part of the reason why Kathleen Cates had presented a bill to kind of protect the rights and allow for these ag exemptions to move forward. She's tried 2 years in a row now to get a bill passed in our legislative sessions, and it has not moved forward out of committee either year. So maybe next year will be the year.
And then what is the percentage increase of that tax base?
Ooh, I don't know what the percentage difference is. Does anybody else in the room know? I know it goes from literally like hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars when you lose that ag exemption, but I don't know what the percentage difference is.
Okay, thank you.
I think she decides what she wants it to be. It's yes, on a personal case, my family's property, we had to go through this process with the uh, assessor, and this was over a year-long process to plead our case and get our agricultural exemption with her, even though our property had been farmed for, over 40 years. My parents have been farming there, and it took forever to get the agricultural exemption. And yeah, I think every year she might have a different feeling on what she wants to change the percentages. So
And we do have on the village website, on the homepage, if you go to the elections tab, we do have questionnaires from 2 of the 3 assessor candidates, and we ask them their opinions on agricultural exemptions and things like that. So I do encourage anybody that is concerned, before you go vote in the primary election, take a look at that and take a look at the voter guide put together by the League of Women Voters. Only 1 of the 3 candidates answered the questions. So might help inform your vote. And like somebody said earlier, do go out and vote too. So.
Yeah. Okay. I think I had one other question. Where was it? Okay, so referring to the stewardship fee. So basically, if I'm understanding correctly, it's covering if there's any violations, and the monitoring it's covering. Anything else?
Yeah.
Someone's salary?
Yeah, it's a lot of it is, our staff time maintaining relationships with the landowners to ensure that we know what's going on. If they do plan on selling, if they do plan on, developing something, even if it's permitted within, the conservation easement. It's also, our work to provide them with resources for better stewardship practices should they choose to take advantage of that too. So we work with a number of other organizations on, identifying potential restoration projects, for example, soil health projects, whatever. So.
Is that you just suggest resources to them?
Yeah, we'll sometimes try to partner or connect landowners with resources or organizations that want to do active restoration.
I think that might be helpful for us with Gonzalez Field right now. Anything that we could do with that, because we're not able to irrigate. And right now it just blows away anytime there's wind. So I think it would be helpful to look at the kind of things that we might be able to do to improve the soil health, hoping that someday we can actually irrigate it and make it productive land. So if Chantel, if you could share some ideas, I think the village would, I don't know, Melanie, would you like to hear about things like that?
I would love to hear about some ideas for our property over there.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Also remember, the Natural Resource Conservation Service is a co-holder on that easement, and they're soil experts.
They haven't been answering the phone for the last 3 months.
Well, you should have gotten a soil conservation plan when you did the easement. There should be one on file somewhere.
Do we have that?
Good question. I will go look.
If not, I can send you a copy, and I can also connect you with Athena, who she was actually at the Gonzalez property last year with me when I did the monitoring visit.
Okay.
Yeah, Chantel, if you could send me a new copy of that, just so we don't have to go dig through our records, that would be so great. Thank you.
Super.
And so how often are you visiting these properties and connecting with the landowners?
Every year.
Once a year?
Once a year. And sometimes more than once a year. It depends on the needs of the property and the landowner.
Yeah, the Land Conservancy has been great for the village. There's been a couple of times where we've called and said, hey, we want to do this. We know there was a pathway approved. Where exactly does it go? Can we put it around the whole property? And they always answer our questions. And I know there's been a few times they've come down and looked at things with us and, actually walked the property with us and said, it can go here, but not here, or, whatever. So they're very responsive when somebody does need help. So thank you guys.
I think that the bird walks that we've been having as an annual event has been very helpful for a lot of different reasons. But the thing I've been most interested in is it's really pointed out the value of having these properties as an easement, that we have had, just great bird populations on them. And it's a way to educate the public that we have this land available and we'd like more of it. So people, please. So I do appreciate NMLC and what you've done with that. And the signage you were able to help facilitate for it, I think is very helpful.
Okay, any other questions?
I'm just wondering if the counselors have any other
Yes.
questions, since this comes before them to make decisions about.
Long story short is that I think council supports the conservation program. We're really in a spot right now because, like I say, the time is short. We've only got so much time to make the decision and get these appraisals done. And the appraisals are what really take a long time. Is that right, Mike?
They can.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to make sure we go.
Okay, so, but anyway, yes, if you're applying, make sure you get all your ducks in a row, get Mike all the information you can, and let's move forward with this. And I don't think we'll have a problem, but like we say, with the candidates we had before, we evaluated them. Some have dropped out. We've only got about $1 million left, and that money won't go far if you've got a lot of land that you want to put it in an easement, but we'll look at it. And then we'll think about the next bond issue coming up in a year or so, and we'll just go from there. And if it gets put on the ballot, we'll probably have some more money for it. So keep the faith. We're hanging in there. We'll be there.
Get up there. Come on.
You drew me into this, though.
Council have power to bring water to the village. I think that would be the one thing we could all agree upon. No, I think this is an excellent presentation. You guys are doing a great job. We look forward to any new applicants you may get. There's certainly land available, to qualify and to evaluate. And Michael does a great job, so no, we're all behind you. So, and we're looking forward to the next bond, as you say, in 27. So thank you.
And thank you to the members of the commission for volunteering for this important commission and for the time that you all put into evaluating these properties and ranking them and coming to extra meetings to share your thoughts and observations with the council. So we appreciate you as well.
One thing I'd just like to say is how we will do this once we get the applications. As Michael said, he will reach out to you and have a meeting. And what the commission does, we went over the criteria that we're going to look at. We come out individually. We don't come out as the complete group. We come out individually. We have a clipboard. We just go through all the criteria, and we're looking at the property as it is. You're welcome to join us. And we're going to be welcome to ask you questions, and you can ask us questions. But that means we'll be coming out 5 different times. 5 different people will come to see you. So I wanted to let you know what you're in for, but you don't have to be there, but we will let you know when we're coming out. So you can join us or not join us, however you want to do it. But just make sure your gate's open and we can get in. We would appreciate that. We don't like climbing over things. Thank you.
You sure you don't have anything to add? Why?
So Jonathan, the stewardship fee, I think an operative word there is perpetuity. Correct. I mean, that's one reason it's at that threshold you described earlier. Now, on those thresholds, is that because there was the mention of $40,000 threshold for a small acreage, 60,000 for a larger acreage. Is there any adaptability to those thresholds based more on a more
I wouldn't call them thresholds so much, but it is like I mentioned, there's this kind of calculator that the Land Trust Alliance developed. We kind of plug in our staff time and anticipated costs, and that kind of spits out a number. So if we generally use that as a guide, there's some flexibility there though.
Okay, thank you.
like I had a question on water rights.
You're too young to be forgetting.
I don't know how to to question it. How do I question it? So the properties need to have water rights, correct? Where am I getting at with this? So when applying for we haven't always had this in the past, but when we're going through our evaluation, in the last one, I asked the landowner, do you have water rights? And they'll tell me, well, yeah, I think so, or whatever. But I think, Michael, you delve into that more and figure it out if they do. And when they're tied together, the conservation easement and tying it with the water rights, can you kind of explain exactly what that means or kind of go into that more I don't think I'm understanding it correctly, but can you explain? One of you all, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so landowners with water rights are required to make beneficial use of their water, right, to maintain the water rights. And by tying it to the water rights to the land, basically requiring the landowners to make beneficial use of it. Usually that's for agriculture. Doesn't have to always be, but is there anything else you want to?
Yeah, so you can think of water rights like the development rights they're giving up. Like every landowner has certain rights associated with their property. Through the conservation easement, they're selling their development rights. What the Conservancy is doing is they're saying, okay, you sold your development rights. This property has agricultural value. So we're requiring you to tie your water rights to the land. You'll never be able to separately sell them to another entity. They have to stay associated with that land. They do have provisions that you can temporarily lease the water rights to a third party, but you cannot sell them. And it has to be temporary lease, not a long-term lease. I think it's annual, right? It has to be renewed annually. Yeah.
Exception for
Yeah.
programs.
Yeah. So that's the purpose is to keep the water with the land. Like what you said earlier, Sam, make sure the land is available for agriculture, right? And it's also important for wildlife habitat too, to have water associated with your land as well. So
I have a question about that. One of the properties, there was a question on whether they had water rights, and the property owner came in and said, "Yeah, I have a well with 3 acre feet, just like everybody else." That's not the same as having water rights for the property, correct? Because everybody that has a residential property has right to a well. I think the Office of the State Engineer is only giving 1 acre feet per year of water rights now, but previously it was 3. But those aren't the kinds of water rights you can tie to a conservation easement, are they? Or am I mistaken in that?
yeah, I believe you can, whether there's surface or subsurface water rights, you can tie them to the property. The issue with subsurface rights is sometimes what they're allowed to use that water for, and whether it's commercial use or residential use. So if we're saying 1 acre has a well on it with 3 acre feet and it's for non-commercial use, one of the questions is if someone wants to farm that 1 acre and sell product off that property, that's a commercial activity. And therefore, is that well actually registered correctly in order to use the water for that purpose? So I'm not a water expert,
right?
But
yeah. I don't know.
I feel like a residential
for Mike back here in the back, but he looks like he's hiding out. But I've learned a lot more about water rights than I thought I would ever know over the last year. But it is kind of a question of, is somebody's residential well from because I know that then you're getting the Office of the State Engineer involved. So we have all of these different organizations. I know, heavy sigh. Yes,
Right.
it is. It is.
On the domestic well situation, if you had a permit and a well drilled prior to 1994, that 3 acre foot is grandfathered in with that particular well. If it's after that, the 1 acre foot comes into play for those wells. So if someone has an acre and a half or whatever, and they're using their well to, kind of keep gardens and landscaping going, that's completely authorized under the state engineer's domestic well permit, particularly if you have 3 acre foot with that well. But like Michael was saying, that if you convert it into some kind of commercial operation with a greenhouse or cannabis operation or whatever, it requires that you find a water right and put it in that well and meter it specific for a commercial operation. But we're trying to work through that with the state engineer in a more global way with this Corrales Farmers Cooperative and a grant that we have to try to maybe look at the communal aspects of it. But a question I had was, okay, you put your water rights, let's say surface rights, that you've got a declaration from the state engineer for pre-1907 rights. You put that in as part of your easement, but because the drought and other factors are requiring that maybe some groundwater needs to be in play to keep that land in whatever condition that the landowner committed to, whether it's cover cropping or whatever the case may be. And the only way they can do it is to take a portion of those pre-1907s and put it in a well, transfer it to a well. I'm wondering if the easement document should reflect the ability to do that, given the state of the surface water conditions we're going to see ongoing, based on climate change and a lot of other things. So what we're hoping we can do in Corrales is get flexibility between groundwater and surface water and recognize that as a state engineer objective, but also do it in a way that's monitored closely so that it's not causing compact problems or other issues that the state engineer and Interstate Stream Commission would be concerned about. So that's a question for you guys. If we could, modify or make the easement agreement associated with water a little bit more flexible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty sure, the management, pretty sure as long as it's staying on the parcel that's under conservation easement, you can transfer it from surface to well, but I'd have to take a look at that. So that's not the case. That's something we'd, be happy to do.
So that would be the Gonzalez property. You can transfer surface to well. So then so specifically then what type of water right does the conservation easement have to have? Like, is there a specific one? Does it have to have this?
Yeah, technically it doesn't have to have either, but whatever it does have will be tied to the land.
Okay. And so then the current landowner's name has to be on that water right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then so you just said something about transferring it from surface to well. So a easement right now that has the conservation easement that only has surface water rights right now, they could potentially transfer it to well.
As long as it's on the conservation easement parcel, I believe that's the case, but I have to double check the language. Do you know, Chantal?
No, I don't think that if you're talking about Gonzalez specifically, I don't think that's
Yeah, we looked into that for Gonzalez because we do have a well over there, and we were told that we couldn't use both our irrigation rights and the well to water that property because that's against Office of the State Engineer rules. So then we said, okay, well, can we transfer the surface rights into the well? But because of the way our deed is written, and Chantal and I talked about this, it looks like we're tied into leaving those as surface rights. So our deed doesn't say that, but as Mike Hammond suggested, maybe it could be a little more flexible in future easements. And I don't know if we have the option to go back and alter an existing agreement for those water rights, but we certainly don't want to be doing anything, that's against Office of the State Engineer rules, violating our easement agreement. We just want to get water to the property. But right now, that's not possible.
So that raises an interesting question, because given that as long as there's a drought and not enough surface water, that land cannot be farmed. So that seems to me, it almost goes against what we're trying to do here. Is there any flexibility in modifying an easement once it's been granted?
Yes, so long as the conservation purposes basically aren't negatively affected, and here because the conservation purpose is really to enable agricultural use, that would be the case. However, The caveat to the Gonzalez one is the fact that it's co-held by NRCS and they have their own required language that needs to be in that deed. So I suspect some of the issue there might be
Yeah, I think it was
NRCS.
part of that. Yeah.
Michael, did you have something?
Yeah, I was gonna say what he just said,
Oh.
but I think the important thing that we should be thinking about is as long as the water remains pertinent to the original conservation easement area. I think, you know, as long as water is being delivered to the property and is able to be delivered to the property, whether it's through a well or through a ditch, I think the main purpose is that it remains pertinent to that property. What we don't want is someone changing their water rights from surface to subsurface and then taking some of the surface and putting it somewhere else, right?
Sure.
It has to all go into that well, no matter, you know, or wells, you know, in some cases. So that's the overriding goal. And that's what he's talking about in terms of the conservation values not being negatively affected, is that it still receives the water. It just receives it in a different way. And so that's.
I'm just wondering if the people that are here that are interested in having an easement might have any other questions that we haven't answered. Otherwise, do you feel good going and filling out that application and submitting it? If not, why not? What's going on?
So I would say it sounds really complex and complicated, and it is, but us three take a lot of that complexity out of the process. So, you know, we want to make sure landowners understand what's going on, but it's not to the level of our expertise. I mean, I've been doing this 20 years and I still feel like there's some things that, you know, that I don't know. So, just, we're here to help. And, so don't feel overwhelmed. We'll make sure that you, feel comfortable through the whole process.
Yeah, it's really awesome if any land can be placed into conservation easement. And I think it's an amazing program that we have here in the village that we can do this through bond funding, because there's no other municipality that does it. So good job, us. So no questions? Everyone's good? Oh. Pass down.
Yeah, I just want to say that the council is very, very interested in moving forward and trying to put as much land under conservation as we can, and looking for new applications and to move forward once again on the 2027 bond to continue this process. As you mentioned earlier, it started 2004, and it's probably one of the, maybe making assumptions here, but I think one of the best in the state, and we want to continue that. It is complex, but the council is wide open to all applicants. So move ahead. Thank you.
Think we're good?
I'm good.
All right, thank you guys so much for being here. Our next Farmland Commission meeting, let me get the date up just so I have it. It is June 18th, and we'll probably go back to our 11 a.m. time. Melanie, do you know if we can still use the community center?
Yep, you'll be able to be back in the community center because voting will be done by then. So
all right,
you will be good. Yeah.
Thank you. So we'll be in the community center building in the back there.
Usually meets at 11 a.m., correct?
Yes, 11 a.m. All right. Thank you, everyone.
But in,
Yeah. Yeah. I know. Yeah.